Hey everyone, welcome to the Real Estate Game Changer Show. I'm your host, Mike McKay, based in the Jacksonville, Florida market. And each and every week, we do this show with people who are changing the game of real estate all over the country. And for anyone who is in the Jacksonville market or maybe thinking about getting into it, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help in any way that we can. And we are still actively buying houses in the Jacksonville area. So if you have any deals to sell, please feel free to reach out to us as well. Um, this is a live show, guys. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments for our guests to answer. And this week on the show, we have Ajay Sharma. Ajay, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, for sure, man. So let's just kick it off. How did you get started in the real estate business, and how has that brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, great question. Great question. I started pretty young. I got out of college. I actually graduated May of 2020. Went to Indiana University. Go Hoosiers for any Big Ten folks out there. Loved it, but graduated, started my career in consulting, like so many folks that go kind of the business school route. You either end up in consulting or accounting or investment banking or one of those kind of routes. And so I was in consulting. Um, Truthfully, you think consulting is one thing and it ends up being another, and you're kind of just like outsourced staff. Like I was doing a lot of staff augmentation, which really just means they like loan you out a lot of times, which was fine. I saw some good business, some bad business, but I think within about 5 or 6 weeks of me being in that, very quickly realized I had a ceiling. Like it didn't matter how many hours I was working. It didn't matter how well I did on projects. It didn't matter how much money I was saving other people. I was being paid the same, like 70 grand or whatever I started out with in terms of salary. And it bothered me. And then I always like to say, but behind every entrepreneur is a really bad manager story. And so, at that 5, 6 week mark, I got staffed on this project, and our managing director on this project, I'll never forget, she was supposed to give us feedback on this deliverable on Wednesday. Didn't until Friday at like 4 o'clock. And she was like, guys, this is terrible. You're going to need to redo it this weekend so we can present it to the client on Monday. And I was like, wait, pump the brakes. Because you didn't do your end of the bargain, because you weren't accountable and showed up on time, I lose my weekend. And so that was the trigger for me, as silly as it is. I'm 22 at the time, and I was like, nope, not letting it not going to give people the power to have control over my schedule. And so,
Hmm.
I'm on the internet loop. I'm on the YouTubes, and stumbled across a YouTube channel called Re Tipster. A little bit of a plug there. He's a good friend of mine, Seth Williams, and there was this YouTube video about 7 ways to make passive income with vacant land. It was like 7 ways to make $1,000 a month in passive income with vacant land. And I was like, that sounds interesting. And so, like everybody else, when they got started in real estate, something triggered it, and then you went down a rabbit hole, right? And so I ended up listening to probably like 11 podcast episodes that night, a bunch of YouTube videos, ended up buying his course, checked it out, and within 3 weeks had sent out my first mailer, a really small marketing campaign, literally 150 yellow postcard mailers. Got my first deal. I bought it for 3 grand all in,
No way.
right over 3,500 bucks. Yeah, I know, it's hilarious. It's hilarious.
From
Um,
150 postcards?
yes, sir. It's insane.
Wow.
Mail is, or excuse me, land is so much less saturated than a lot of other niches. But yeah, no joke. 150 postcards. It was a tax delinquent list, if that means anything. But still, though, first deal, bought it for 3,500 all in, sold it at 15,000 after title fees, realtor fees, netted about 9 grand, and I was hooked. Right. So after that, went down the rabbit hole and started scaling up my business. Fast forward to today, I've got 4 on my staff. Well, as of today, 3 for the next 10 weeks. My acquisitions manager actually just went into labor, so she's out for a little bit, but 4, 3 on staff, whichever way you want to look at it. I've got a business partner. His name's Ben. He's right now making sure the business is running and that we're making money while I'm doing stuff like this. And we're having fun flipping land, man.
Cool. So you guys were in land kind of from the start.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's that's like not usual, right? A lot of people I hear who've gotten into land, they started maybe in another area of real estate and then moved over to land. How did you make that decision early on that, hey, this is the route that I want to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. Truthfully, I remember at the time I was assessing a couple other strategies, but like, remember, I was young and I had an okay paying job, but I had no money to my name. I think I had probably 9 grand in terms of net worth, not including my hail damaged Nissan Sentra that I drove at the time. And so, it was like I had no net worth, no capital. I didn't come from money. Like my family, when I was born, we were in like Section 8 food stamps, that whole thing. And so I by no means came from money. So as I was assessing these different channels, obviously I had a very different skill set and knowledge back then, but it was like, oh, in house wholesaling, like I'm not going to go drive for dollars in the Chicagoland area. That's where I'm based out of, which seemed like the lowest barrier to entry way to get deals. And aside from that, it was, spit out a lot of money in terms of marketing. And then I had to put this house under contract and figure out how to dispo it. And it just seemed really rocky to me from the outside. Now that I'm, in the real estate niche, could I figure out how to flip houses and wholesale houses? Absolutely. Right. Honestly, you just hire a bunch of mentors and figure it out, but that's neither here nor there. I acknowledged the barrier to entry though for some of these other niches. And when I saw land and land is we've bought properties as cheap as a few $1,000s and up through the 6 figures mark. And I know people that buy well through the 7 figure mark and some even 8. And so there's tons and tons of land in the U.S. I always joke that in Texas alone there's 171 million acres. So like competition doesn't really matter, But all that being said, the barrier to entry was so much lower for a poor kid coming right out of college. And so it made it really easy to just kind of jump in and be like, oh, I only need to put aside, a couple thousand in terms of marketing. I'll get a deal. I'll be able to buy the deal. So there was no limiting belief on can I actually make this work? And then I just go list it with a realtor so I don't have to manage and think about dispositions. And then it'll sell when it sells. And it sold in 3 weeks because it was also, fall of 2020. I got started in September of 2020, which anybody that's been in real estate for a few years knows the market was just red hot and every piece of poop property would fly off the shelf. So I got in a good time.
Cool. And so what's your strategy now? Are you closing on all the land and then selling it, or are you wholesaling some, or how do you go about things?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. So I think I just want to set the stage for everybody that, unless you're doing infill lots, and what I mean by that is like a 1/4 acre lot in an already developed area that has utilities more often than not, you're not flipping these lots to developers, right? So I know people that do the wholesale game and they'll make anywhere between, you can make between like 3,000 and 20,000 on a wholesale deal, not too different than like a house assignment in land. But truthfully, it's really competitive in that infill lot space. I did a lot of it in Florida for a while, and then a bunch of these house wholesalers kind of came in, and I found myself fighting for $3,000 assignment fees, where I'm like, you know what, there's a better way. And so we've done that. Most of the time, we'll actually take title to the property and then list it either internally. We've got, our own marketing channels, but we can use MLS, we can use land.com, which is owned by CoStar. Same guys that do LoopNet and all that stuff. And so that, they rank really well in terms of search. But truthfully, we buy probably 60% of our properties, and we will wholesale the other 40, but we wholesale to the retail market. So it's like what a lot of house flippers are doing in the novation space right now, except we're not necessarily we're not doing improvements to the property more often than not. We're asking for 90 to 180 days from our sellers, and we'll go list it on the platforms and work the buyers and find a buyer and then do the double close. So we do both. And, I've got deals. We just did one where we had an $8,000 assignment fee. I've got another deal in North Florida that we just bought for $150,000. We cut it up into 2 20-acre lots. It was a 40-acre lot. And we've got that listed at 300 right now and are getting some decent traction on it. So, we're all over the place.
Yeah. And how do you make the decision on your guys' end whether you're going to take it down, right? And then, take title and then list it versus kind of going the, put it on the MLS, double closing.
Yeah.
To the market.
Yeah. So I'll look at 2 different things. Primarily, it's risk and it's margin is what I'll say. And so like if I have risk that something can go wrong from the transaction on the front end, and I have a lot of margin, meaning I'm buying it for 50% or less of market value, I see that as no risk from a purchasing decision, right? Like I'm going to be able to make money on this lot, rain or shine, because I buy in markets that are states people are moving to within 2 hours of a major airport. I've never had trouble selling a property before. We actually just got done selling a property that was underwater in the Keys. So everything sells. I mean, this thing was literally just like a pool. And on the flip side, so we'll wholesale properties if they have 20,000 in margin, but we're above that 50% mark, but they have to be in good demand areas. So I see that as low risk in the sense
Mm,
that we're going to be able to find a buyer, but high risk from an acquisition price, right? And so
mm,
I don't know exactly what the market's going to do, but I know I can get out of a contract. Whereas once you own a piece of property, the only way out of it is really selling it, right? Versus losing escrow money or due diligence fees or whatever you spend money on in terms of like survey, photos, listings, all that kind of stuff, right? And then of course your team's time. But
yeah.
those are the two ways I kind of look at, which way are we going to go? And we have a mix of lines of credit, funding partners, our own capital that we'll leverage for when we purchase properties. And in the land space, it's just really easy to find money if you're buying a deal under that 50% of market value mark. Like I can find money all day
Mhm.
long if I'm buying for half of what it's worth.
Okay. That was actually going to be my question because I've heard people say it's hard to finance land purchases, but they all kind of seem to be kind of frankly talking out of their ass, right? They've never actually done it. Um,
Yeah.
so it seems like it's
It
possible, right? It seems like that's just like a myth that it's hard.
It is certainly possible. You've got to be really careful. I'll tell you, it's really changed in the past 2 years. So, like when I started in the scene, there was almost nobody funding deals. It was extremely difficult. You'd have to,
Mhm.
like I've used credit cards to buy properties before. I don't, advise that necessarily, but if you get a good business credit card, and you're going to flip the property quick, take your points and run, right? So,
Yeah.
I'll take the free vacation to Costa Rica or whatever with my points that I just bought 2 lots in Ocala, Florida with. But anyways, my point being, 2 years ago was honestly fairly accurate. It was really, really hard to find money in land because most real estate guys just don't understand the asset or the business. Most business guys don't lend on real estate. Is kind of how it plays out, right?
Hmm.
And then banks won't touch it
Yep.
with a 10-foot pole at that level. Now that changes. It's funny. Like banks change. Like the bigger you get, the easier it is to find money because they can deploy a meaningful enough amount of capital to actually make money on it themselves, and they can assess risk at a different level because there are
Hmm.
resources. Because again, there's money involved, right? So you see the economics catch up. All that being said, in the past 2 years, because people have made money on land, a lot of land funders are also land investors. So they understand the game, so they see it as lower risk. However, it's not uncommon for somebody
Mm.
to, if they're going to fund your deal, they're going to take 30 to 50% of your deal. And so for me, like that just doesn't
Oh
scale
wow.
very well, to be honest. Like giving away half your deal, yeah, I know it's pretty significant. And I'll just say too, anybody that's out there, if you're looking for money on land, just a quick like objection handling. Whenever I have funders tell me, "Hey, I want 40% of the deal because I'm taking all the risk," I argue back, respectfully, of course, but it's like, Mike, you're not taking all the risk, right? I have overhead, I have staff, I have payroll, I have marketing dollars invested, and I need to make all this go round. Like you are not the only person that has risk here, just because you had a deal handed to you on a silver platter with equity built in, and you're dishing out some cash right now, right? In fact, you probably have the least amount of risk of all of us right now. I should give you 10% on your money, and we shouldn't even be having this discussion, but that's really pretentious. So I don't actually ever say that. It's more so just like
That's
use that
aggressive
as a way to,
tasteful.
yeah. I would never speak to anyone that way that I wanted to do business with. It's more so just like, hey man, look, here are the facts. Like I have risk in the deal. Don't tell me I don't have risk, right? But like, can
Yeah.
we get to a better number? I've done stuff all the way from like 2.5% on hard money up to 12 to 20% cash on cash return over a 12-month period. And then if I do JV splits, like I don't do anything above 30%. After that, it's too much of my deal that I'm giving away. I work really hard to, run the team and make sure we're doing the follow-ups and running the system. And so for me to give away 30% of my deal is just, it makes it harder to scale, right? You want to reinvest in the business and you got to get paid.
Yeah. You need money coming in. So, you mentioned like Ocala is somewhere you've done some deals, but you mentioned offline before, like you kind of market to like 6 different states, I think you said.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, we've done marketing a little bit of everywhere. I did almost exclusively Florida for probably about 14 months. And when we did, we were
Mm,
doing a lot of infill lots. And so again, it was those quarter acre lots. And like I said, I just saw the house wholesalers begin coming in, and I don't like fighting for margins, man. And so I just realized if I started playing in more of a rural sandbox, like we target stuff that's like 7, 8 acres plus, you just have so much less
mm,
competition because truthfully, the liquidity on the back end is so much worse. Like on average, it takes me about 70 days on market to move a deal before I move it. And so when your liquidity pool is lessened, there's just going to be inherently less competition, right? The easier the
Mm,
access to capital is, the more competition, the more efficient the market is, et cetera, et cetera. So if I can still act in a market inefficiency like what real estate investors do and capitalize on it in the rural space, it's just forever going to be less competitive because of that lack of liquidity, because things move slower. Like it's not uncommon for me to have a property sit for 4 to 6 months. And I'm okay with
mm,
that because you build up enough cash, you recognize, hey, if I have 6 to 12 months of runway on my operating expenses and I own inventory, it will sell over a period of time. If it doesn't, when you get closer to that 3 month mark, it's a different discussion you need to have, right? But all that being said, like I know how to turn the marketing machine on. I know how to go flip some infill lots and generate some quick cash if I need to. So you've got to be resourceful, but also be like mindful of the business in front of you. So, anyways, I bring that up to say we were doing Florida infill for a long time, and then we just
mhm,
we started getting into rural, and for us, like truthfully, it was just a lot of spraying and praying. Like I wish I could tell you, like, oh no, Mike, we just do all our deals in rural Texas because there's so much of it, but we just don't. We text message as our primary marketing channel. We send out about 15,000 new touches every single month, and on average, we're getting about 5 contracts out of that. Now you'll lose one of those in title, so take that with a grain of salt. But we're pushing out that amount of volume, and with that, like land data is so much less fragmented than like house data. Like you could stick in Florida, it's really cool. You could stick in like 1 or 2 markets and just milk those for forever, because you've just got
mhm.
so many houses that are there, and so many new probates that are happening, and so many new houses that go tax delinquent or utilities turn off or whatever your list you're targeting is. Whereas in land, man, we the only like filters we'll pull are, I just want like a length of ownership and a proximity to location. So like out of
Mm,
county owner or out of state owner that's owned a property for over 8 years that's not an LLC owner, and that's a leveraged list to us versus you guys doing probate lists. Like
yeah.
it's a very different game. But yeah, so we just have been spraying and praying for about the past year, Mike, because we don't have our markets nailed down. We've got probably 10 to 15 counties we've begun to work in that we really like. But I'd be lying to you if I was like, oh, we got it down to a science. We know where we're at. We have our markets. I'd be full of crap.
Yeah. Is there like not even like enough like inventory that you could buy in a specific county? Is that kind of why you also have to go wide? Or because like yeah, there's
It really
250,000 single family homes in Jacksonville, right? That's a lot of opportunity
right.
to buy something. But,
Yeah, I'll tell you, when we target a county, it really depends on what county you're in. For example, like Mojave County, Arizona, very common investor county for a land investor. For those that don't know where that is, it is the desert of California. It's about 2 hours from Las Vegas, though. So you get some folks that like to have either off grid living, shoot their guns, four wheel, that kind of stuff.
huh.
And so you get quite a bit of that out in that like Mojave Desert. Very common. There's probably 40,000 parcels of land in that county alone, which is tons for land investors, right?
Mhm.
Whereas in a market like, I'm trying to think of one I've worked in, like Wood County, Texas is probably a good example. Man, when I pull my filters, I've probably got a list of 3,000 records that I could actually hit via direct mail. Now you skip trace that and you try to upload it into launch control, and now that list is down to like 2,000, right? And I just told you we send out
Mm,
800 new touches every single day. So now I've got 2.5 days of text messaging, right? So you see very quickly how our lists go smaller, which is why it's essential to have so much data. So in this business, you do kind of have an advantage if you use like a direct mail marketing channel, because there's more marketing you can get through essentially, that's qualified with a bigger list, right? Because you like mailing addresses are mailing addresses. You're not going to lose those as much as you will cold calls or text messages as a primary marketing channel. So, anyways, I know you just
mhm.
asked me about my markets, but I went on a couple of side tangents there. Apologies.
No, no, you're good. You're good. Um, Got it. So you guys are in all those different areas, and then you said your average days on market is about 70 when you go to sell a property,
Yeah, yeah. Just over that. I think we're 72, 73 last I checked.
which seems like actually, and that's till you go in contract or till you actually sell the property.
Till we're under contract. Sorry, yeah, I should have specified that.
There- Yeah, that still like seems like pretty quick sometimes, just from what I hear. We don't really do much land besides a few infill lots, but kind of what you were. That seems like reasonably quick. Is there like what strategies do you have to move those properties in, a fairly reasonable, I guess, amount of time for large amounts of land?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you. Here are the hacks, and man, we're talking at a good time because if you had asked me this 6 months ago, I'd be like, dude, I don't know. You just list them cheaply, maybe, and see what happens, right? But we've really defined our dispo process a lot more over the past like 3 4 months. And so, a couple of things, man, is number one, it's marketing and sales all over again. Like, you need to understand that's your acquisitions funnel, that's your dispositions funnel, and truthfully, that's anything else you're doing. Like, we go outbound with realtors a lot, and I look at it as a whole separate funnel in our business. We have a qualification
Mm.
process, whole different thing. But fact of the matter is, on the dispo side, you got to do a couple of things, right? Number one is marketing. It's as simple as that. And so we have 4 channels that are actually extremely effective in marketing. None of them are going to be a surprise to anybody. 2 of them are extremely archaic and 2 of them are classic. Okay. And so number one is the MLS. You probably heard of it. It's the multiple listing service. Most areas have it. I'm just messing around. But we obviously leverage the MLS. I mean, it's just, people are on Zillow, Trulia, Redfin, all that stuff. Number 2, then, is land.com. So I mentioned is owned by CoStar. They rank really well in search. So CoStar just invests so much money to make sure when people Google land for sale in Ocala, it's going to rank, right? And so they're going to click on it. It's going to rank. They're going to go into it. And so that's been a really good channel for us. It's really important to recognize just like the need for speed with different marketing channels. So like for anybody here that's in houses, for example, if you do PPC, right, you just know like you should almost have like a call porter on the back end of your PPC, because as soon as that lead comes in, it's hot, right? They're not just putting stuff in on your site, they're putting them in on all the sites. That's how we look at our dispo with land.com. And so as soon as those numbers come in, one of our agents is on the phone like that, because I just know somebody's searching and doing inquiries right away, right? So you got to know your marketing channels and understand your demographic coming through them. The next 2 are pretty archaic. So you got to get a sign in the property. I know that sounds silly, but when you look at the data, I can't remember where I read this. Someone feel free to fact check me on this, DM me. I'm more than happy to have a discussion if I'm wrong here. So apologies if I'm giving you wrong information. But I heard somewhere that about 20% of land transactions are not done through the MLS. So, that's roughly 1 in 5. I think that's about double what you
Mm.
see on houses. I think houses, it's about 9% that aren't done on the MLS, if I remember right. So that's
Yep.
pretty significant. So you're probably seeing family, you're probably seeing neighbors, you're probably seeing local folks, right? Essentially. And I think you get some Facebook Marketplace. It's actually a really big channel for people that do a good job with it. Our team just doesn't have the, honestly, the subject matter expertise or just like the throughput to manage all those Facebook Marketplace inquiries. I know you can get cheap VAs to do it. We just don't. It's a pain in the butt. So I'm sick of having our accounts blocked or denied or whatever. And so
Sure.
we just don't. I would did because I know it's good if you can get the machine going. But so for us, it's a sign in the property, and then we actually cold call and send neighbor letters. So neighbors are that 4th one. So I
Mm.
have, one of my $10 an hour VAs. She just calls every neighbor on the block. So typically somewhere between 20 and 40 phone numbers. And we'll just call and say, hey, we've got a property we're going to list for sale. We just want to give the neighbors a first swing at it. And if they're interested, then we go through a whole separate process. But that's step 1 is honestly just our marketing, right? And then you got to know how to manage your leads after those come in. Past that, it's like, Mike, it's really a function of you have to recognize humans are lazy. So keep in mind, this is the retail market. These folks are not making money on this property. It's very different. This is typically recreational property we're dealing with, or maybe like a retirement site, but it's typically recreational if you're dealing with big rural acreage over 8 acres. Okay. And
Mhm.
so what's really, really important is your qualification process and your call to action with all of these. Okay. And so we
Mm.
recognize that in our qualification, we have to ask a couple of questions like how they're going to purchase the property. We can do owner financing. We have a network of people who are note buyers that'll buy a note on the back end. If we get, a seller with a decent credit score to put 20% down, get 10% interest on it, they'll cash us out at 80% of face value. But you got to ask about financing, if they're going to use a bank, if they're going to use, their own cash, that sort of thing. But next, man, you really have to drive them to go visit the property. And so we do that through urgency. Hey, Mike, just so you're aware, man, we've had like 3 or 4 other people call today. When do you think you're going to be able to go visit the property? We just like to get appointments on the calendar to make sure people aren't walking at the same time. Oh, you see how from a sales perspective, immediately you've like elevated your status as a property on the market, right? And so we use tactics
Yep.
like that to get people to walk the property. But the actual goal is as soon as people have feet on the property and they see it, right? Now there's an emotional connection there. And again, like this is a home site or it's a rural property. They're gonna, if they've got a stock pond on there, they're gonna fish with their kids. If they're, 4-wheeling, dirt biking, they're just gonna have fun on this thing. Like they need to see it though. If people don't walk the property, it's really, really hard to get a contract to them. right? And so when we
Mm,
hire agents, that's one of our qualification questions is like, are you going to walk the properties with the buyers? Because if you're not, man, I can list on the MLS. I don't need you to take a 6% riff off my top line if all you're going to do is list it on the MLS, right? I need you to put the sign in the property and get good pictures and go walk the property. And honestly, we can go do all that stuff on our own. We just need somebody to walk the property truly. If you've got subject matter expertise, your own buyers list, and walking the property, you're a competitive advantage in my mind. And so we really drive people to go visit the property once they're out there, and then we're doing everything we can to follow up and just make the deal happen, man. We're deal makers, right? So, hey, if it's a money thing, we just mentioned three different things: connect them with the mortgage broker, connect them with the bank person if they don't have one, right? Can I get them owner financing on the right terms? Can we do the math to make it work? And if they have the cash, right, figure out how much cash they have. So it's a lot of marketing and sales is the short answer, but truly, man, it's marketing and sales. Get them on the right platforms, post them in the places, and then usher the lazy people to the greener pastures.
yeah. You mentioned agents. So you do hire an agent to represent you in each property when you list it?
Yeah, typically. The caveat is if we do infill lots, we just go outbound. We'll go and call a bunch of
Sure.
LLCs that have bought in the area, right? Cash buyers, not an uncommon focus because typically, like the builders are going to want 10 to 15% off the top, and I'm like, if I can move this quicker without an agent in the middle, I'm just going to have again my VA just call all the builders and see if we can get somebody, and it always works. And so
Yeah.
aside from that, though, yeah, I really like agents on my properties because, man, like I don't need to tell you, dispositions isn't another. It's a whole department in the business, and so the more we manage
Mhm.
dispo in house, the less energy I have to manage acquisitions on the front end, right? And so I want to make sure
Mhm.
that I can give people the attention. Like I'm a little woo woo man, and I feel like most entrepreneurs are. Like you got like all that, like that head stuff you need to work through, and so I truly believe like where you put attention is where things thrive, right? And so if I put a lot of
Mhm.
tension on dispositions, which is important, don't get me wrong, then we're just going to be so focused on selling properties, you're going to see your acquisition suffer, right? So that's why when you're in building phases of your business, different segments will really suffer depending on how big your team is and what accountability and responsibility certain teammates have. And so I bring that all up to say, just like it's really important that you acknowledge where the energy goes is where things thrive. And so I like to delegate it if I can find a quality agent in that area. And so again, we've got,
Mhm.
we'll go, if we're in a new market, we're going to call 10 realtors. We have a qualification process. We have a list of questions we go through to gauge some things. We've got a ranking system. And then we're going to say, this is the guy, this is the gal we're going to work with. And we'll get it done. And we tell them on the front end, hey, this is our business. I want you to know I'm going to check in every 1 to 2 weeks. Here are the metrics I'm going to ask, right? I ask two things. I say, how many leads did we get? How many people walked the property? Because if you're a fan of Alex Hormozy, I feel like most business people have at least heard his name at this point, right? He's a really big proponent of like whatever you communicate your direct reports to report to you, whatever metrics you have them report to you, that's what they're going to pay attention to. So it's really, really important what
Mhm.
KPIs you have people report to you. And so with our realtors, it's like those are the two driving factors that we see is how many leads are we getting? Because if we're not getting phone calls, either our marketing's bad, our copy's bad, our photos are bad, we're not in the right places, or maybe we just priced it wrong, right? Maybe we just thought it was here and the market's really here, right? The market will tell you. But I need to dive in. If I'm 3 weeks in and I haven't gotten a phone call, something's wrong, right? And
Yeah.
so we just need to dive into that stuff. But yeah, so we typically like to use agents though, is the short answer there.
Gotcha. And then speaking of like pricing it wrong or pricing it right, I mean, a lot of times people say it can be kind of difficult to price this rural land, right? Not a lot of sales happen in the area. How do you go about, I mean, first of all, pricing for knowing what you're going to buy it for, and then obviously pricing when it comes time to sell it?
Man, I just make numbers up. I'm not gonna lie to you. No, I'm joking.
You just take half the assessed value, and
It's
that's probably close enough.
right. Oh gosh, yeah. No, funny enough, people did that probably 4 or 5 years. I mean, people still do that, I guess. But God, that is not what we're doing. The short answer is we look at the comps, man, and it's a tricky game. But like what we're typically looking for is proximity, similar acreage, similar utilities, similar school zones, right? If you can nab those four
Hmm.
things, you're going to get pretty similar lots. Like I just know land in the like 5 to 9 acre subset is going to trade pretty similar price per acre It starts to shift around that 8 acre mark up through like 15, right? And there's another range you kind of see where, okay, this is where you're getting price per acre. And so you're looking for themes. Like I'm not, if I've got a 12 acre parcel, I'm not going to go look for 12 acre parcels in the same city.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go look for, parcels between 8 and 15 acres. And I'm going to look at all the solds over the past, you got to expand your range. So in houses, you can do 90 days, and in landmen, you got to go like 18 months. Like it really depends, but it depends on your area, depends on the data that's accessible. You just got to open up your sample size though. If I don't have it in the city, I'm going to go countywide. If I don't have it in the county, I'm going to expand the parameters. And then, truthfully, call a couple of brokers. So we'll talk to agents and you try to find the subject matter expert. If you're in rural Texas, I'm going to go try to find the old boy that's a 6th-generation native that's wearing a cowboy hat, right? He knows what this is going to sell for. So it's your classic Dan Sullivan of who, not how. But internally, when we're making offers on properties, obviously comping, due diligence, having that at a decent metric, and being able to make offers on properties, you got to be able to comp in house. We're just looking at similar acreage, similar size, similar area, utility, school zone, and if we can nab those things, we're gonna make the offer, and we're gonna be right most of the time.
Yeah. And then talk about due diligence. It's obviously a little bit different than a house, right? There's other things you have to do.
Absolutely. So we have 2 phases of due diligence. We have the phase before we make an offer on a property, and then after we get a contract signed, which I think is pretty similar to everybody, right? But you don't want to spend time on properties you definitely wouldn't want to buy. So you want to look at the most frequent eliminators that take the least amount of time on that first phase, right? So for us, that's floodplains, wetlands, road access, topography, and there's one more. Maybe you do a baseline of comps to just make sure that it's something you'd want to buy or is in your range, right? Just generally, all right? So we look at those 5 things and we eliminate if they don't meet our criteria. If it's too steep, you can't do anything except for climb a mountain, right? Like I'm probably not going to buy it. If I don't think it's going to perk, I'm probably not going to buy it.
Yeah.
But if it's got no road access or is covered in wetlands, it's just like not my ideal property, right? And so that's our phase 1 due diligence, is those activities. Phase 2 is where we verify ownership. We're going to go look at the deed. Obviously, title is going to do stuff, but ideally, we figure some stuff out before it gets to title, right? Because I don't want to go pay the search and all that stuff, and I can have somebody do that for $10 an hour on my team. So we're going to verify ownership. We are going to obviously double check the comps. We're usually going to talk to a couple of brokers under the assumption we're going to use one in the area. So we're looking for a partner. We're going to ask for a couple of opinions of value. We are going to double check with the county about land use typically. So like planning and zoning, we're going to make sure we can actually do things with the property. Hey, what's permitted use? Hey, what can I do? Again, I think I mentioned to you, we sold a 13-acre lot in the Keys for 25 grand to some random Turkish investor. He found us on the internet and bought the property. But we were like, dude, you can't do anything with it. Like they've told us you can keep bees, you can get a coral reef, you can't even keep your boat on it, and you can build a tree house. And that was it. That was pretty much it. And he was like, no, it's okay. I just know it's the Keys, so it's going to go up in value. Okay, man. Like we did our part, okay. Right? But you gotta, yeah, right. Like, so I think those are a lot of the core activities that we're doing. It's ownership, it's taxes, it's land use, it's that kind of stuff. And then, if you have to get soil tests done or surveys or verify road access through some other means, get a title search if you need to. Obviously we get a title search. We go through title on every acquisition, but sometimes like they're contingent upon road access and you have to verify you have legal access, not just physical.
Sure. And then, got it. So, and then you guys are typically trying to purchase, you said, for like kind of 50% of where you believe you'd be able to sell it for, because that makes it easy for you guys to get financing on it. Got it.
Exactly. Yeah. Are both get financing, and then obviously oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say it ensures our, we're like low risk essentially. Cause again, land is a less liquid market than other real estate classes. So I just need to know if there's a market correction in the time period I thought that it would have sold for, if there's a 20 to 30% correction, I'm still somewhat insulated from risk. And as long as I'm in areas with fundamentally good demand, I know I'll be able to sell the property at some given point in time. I'm just not as liquid as gold. So I know it's not going to happen instantly. Right. Or even houses where I can typically get out in 30 days. Right. And so For us, we recognize that we got to keep ourselves insulated from risk, and I'm a big fan of Buffett and Munger, right? Two guys that are well known in the investing space, and they just believe in investing in fundamentals, right? So very seldomly am I appreciating the value of a piece of dirt. We have done some minor lot splits in the past where we just like cut up properties from big properties to smaller, but for the most part, it's just flips and wholesale. And so if we're not adding value to it, we need to build that equity in through our marketing and sales, right? So we got to buy it at a big enough discount that we can sell it at a discount and move it fairly quickly and do all the things.
And are your buyers, I know you're kind of selling to the retail market for the most part, but are they typically building homes on these properties, or are they just kind of using them for, I don't know, hunting or whatever they use them for?
That's a great question, Mike. It depends, man. So like we have sold very rural mountain properties in Colorado that nobody's putting a home on. It's like, yeah, this guy, like I've sold properties and you get the old boys that are like, oh boy, it's gonna be great for dirt biking. The guys you can like barely understand because they but they're awesome, man. They're really good, like high integrity people. So I love doing business with them. Um, but they're not putting a home on it. They're just trying to four wheel, shoot guns, dirt bike, that sort of thing. And then you have a whole other demographic that if it's like a 7+ acre lot that's like pretty flat with a lot of woods. Some people just like owning some land, man, and they like being able to camp and have
Mm,
fires, and maybe they still hunt a little bit on the property, but they just like rural home sites. So like we're working on a project right now. I just submitted an offer to actually an on market property in Texas, and it's a 54-acre property. We've been working with this for about a week now, and I think we'll figure something out if we can buy it between 7-8 grand an acre. We're getting a quote on water taps and meters and everything today, but I think it'll be less than 70,000 for that. So as long as that's under 70,000, our underwriting will pan out. We'll buy for 450 to 470. We should be able to cut it up though and sell off 8 different lots at averaging like $15,000 to $17,000 an acre. And so it's like, okay, I'm buying this lot, and after all, I'll be able to get into
mm.
it for probably 450, and we should be able to dispo it for somewhere between 800 and 950, which is huge margin. Right now, I'm going to need to get financing on that, and so I'm talking to folks already of like, hey, who wants to give
Yeah.
me money at 15%? I'm running this project. We should be in and out in 6 months for paperwork. I'd like 12 just to sleep well at night. But that's stuff that we're working on. That we do force appreciation into properties. And man, there's a ton of on market deals in counties that have like state exemptions is what it's called, where essentially it's like, oh, you don't have to do anything to go get this subdivided. Like in Texas, any property that if the child parcels are over 10 acres, you can just cut
Hmm.
them up and record it with the county. Just get a surveyor out there is basically all you need to do. So if you have good road access and you have the utilities you need, right? You can force appreciation into this piece of dirt just by getting it surveyed, essentially, which is crazy, right? Now it's not always that
That's
simple,
crazy.
man. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot that goes into the underwriting of this stuff, but it's kind of like when you're like, oh, like houses are so easy. You just like redo some walls and the floors, and like maybe you do some paint and stuff, and like I just made 20 grand. And it's like, yeah, it like sounds really easy after you've done it a bunch, but like when you start from zero, like you don't know what you don't know. You're like, all right, I'm missing something here. You know what I mean? Like I am humble enough to admit that I'm an idiot, man. So I
Yeah.
pay a lot of people smarter than me to do things so that I make sure they're executed correctly, thankfully.
Yeah. What are some mistakes that you see people who are maybe newer in the land flipping business make?
Yeah. I think the first one would be trying to force deals. And maybe that's not, unique to land. I think that's all real estate. But it's like, oh man, like there's $14,000 in margin on this property. I'm like, yeah, because you got somebody to say yes at 200 and it's worth 215. Man, that sucks. Like you don't want to try to move that. You're not, you're unless you're in a red hot fire market. Like land, that's just not a lot of margin. If you're working with less than 10% margin, you're gonna need to discount it. People are gonna lowball you. It's just not the asset you're gonna get top dollar for unless you've got super premier property. Like it's just rare. And
Mhm.
so I'm trying to force deals is a quick one. Man, land guys are probably the cheapest real estate investor class I have ever met in my entire life, man. Like before we jumped on this today, you told me there are some people sending out 200,000 letters a month. Nobody that I know is anywhere near that. I think that anybody who's like a big player is sending out like 20 to 50,000 units of mail a month, and that's considered like you get the like normal land investors that are like, whoa, like are there even going to be deals out there for us? And it's like, yeah, of course. Right. But the point being, like, it's still so unsaturated as a real estate niche. There are areas, of course, that are more competitive than others, but as an asset class as a whole, man, like, I still think land today is what house wholesaling was sometime between like 2012 and 2016. Like, you can be so
Mm.
bad at this business and still make like $250,000. I know it because I've done it, and and it's funny. I talked to a lot of investors, and I'm like, hey, how much you make last year? And after you do this for a while, I'm sure you get this. You can ask a couple of questions of like, what types of markets do you hit? What types of deals do you do? How much marketing do you? What's your team look like? And I'm like, you probably made what, between 250 and 400 last year? Yep. You can kind of like get a feel for it, right? And I'm like, hey,
Yep.
what's your follow up process like? And they're like, well, the leads come in, and we call them back. And if we get voicemail, we move them to a drip, or we just say it's lost and then wait for the next one. I'm like, what? What do you mean? And again, these
What?
guys are making $250,000 a year. I'm not joking, Mike. There's so
Wow.
much opportunity in this niche. Like, I've realized, if you just have good fundamentals of marketing, sales, follow up, prioritization, all the stuff you learn on how to run a business, how to run a sales and marketing organization, you can crush in this niche. Crush. Like, it is still, and like wholesaling,
Yeah.
flipping, it's all the same stuff. Like, you don't, like, when markets get competitive, the business doesn't cease to exist. You just, there's less room for mediocrity, right? And you just have to like make sure you really scale the fundamentals truly. And so margins will compress a little bit. There's less room for mediocrity. So just like be good, hang out with smart people like yourself, do good deals, do quality deals, and you're always going to be able to run a big business. I always use this as the example when people are scared of saturation. I say, like, Mike, think about an organization like Walmart, right? Now they've got multiple streams of income now, so like maybe don't think of them today. But like 20 years ago, I think is a great example of, they grew this multi-billion dollar organization through 3% margins on groceries in one of the most competitive businesses you could imagine, right? Groceries. Like,
Yep.
that is a cutthroat business I would not want to be in, unless I'm like Whole Foods and I just charge you like $30 for a pretzel, right? And so, okay, that's not what they do,
Right.
but it's more like $20 for a salad. But still,
Close.
the
Yeah.
point being,
Close.
yeah. The point being, though, that like, unless you're in like a unique, right, like a blue ocean, if you will. I think I've got Blue Ocean Strategy right here on my bookshelf. Actually, I think that might be the wrong book, but yeah, that was right. Neither here nor there, man. The point being, like, it's not a competitive niche, and margins are still super high. Like, there's still plenty of opportunity in every single real estate niche out there. You just can't be bad, right? Be less bad.
Yeah. Less bad. And have you guys done anything kind of like where you acquire like a large site and then maybe sell it to a developer or entitle it or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, great question, man. I've got friends that do entitlements. I'll tell you, Mike, there are like stacks to this game. Okay. So like in land, you're gonna get like the cheap stuff. And this is like, people will go buy a 5-acre desert square in Castilla County, Colorado. You can buy one of those for $2,000. You'll go sell it for 5,000. Right? You can get a little 3,000 in margin. You can't use realtors. You got to use your own platforms. You got to self-close because you have no room for title. You can sell that stuff on owner financing. People will cash flow $200-300 a month on those kinds of deals. I don't touch that. Okay. And then there's like a next level where you're making like 10, 15, 20 grand on properties, right? And those are just like good classic flips, right? 10, 15, 20 grand, very, very similar to like assignment fees, more or less. Your cash conversion cycle changes at each one of these levels, in my opinion. And so every time you go up in how much you're making, typically your cash conversion goes down, the exception being probably the past 2 years where everything just sold like crazy. Okay. And so
Mm.
next you kind of get a nice sweet spot of flips of like buy for 30 to 70 and double your money, right? So that 50 to like 150 is a really good sweet spot in this niche where you're having to spend a lot more money on marketing every time you go up, right? But your margins are just so much better that your ROAS is honestly pretty similar. So you do less deals and make, pretty much more money, right? And
For,
so,
for people who don't, for people who don't know what ROAS and cash conversion cycle is, can you explain those?
yeah, man, I honestly just make up words. I don't know what they are either. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so cash conversion cycle is, think how much time does it take me to make money, right? If you're from the accounting world, it's kind of like inventory turnover, so to speak. But like you can look at it through two lenses, right? It's when I send out marketing, how long does it take me to turn that into dollars? Or it's when I purchase an asset, how long does it take me to turn that to dollars, right? Because you've got title fees in between, listing time, all the things that come in between. And so, yeah, that's cash conversion. ROAS it stands for return on ad spend. So ROAS. And so that's like, hey, if I put $10 in, I get $6 out. I have a 6x ROAS, right? So if I put $3,000 in, I'm going to make $18,000, 6x ROAS. That's typically what you're seeing on direct mail and land right now is about 6x ROAS, which is awesome compared to what I hear what my house friends are getting. And like, yeah, I know. But again, your cash is slower. It's a less liquid market. So you've got trade-offs there, right? If you're playing with your own money, for example, like you want velocity of money, right? Until you can go raise some capital, you want your money to move quicker. And that's a disadvantage of land is you need to be able to raise capital if you're trying to scale quickly. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to buy and sell property at the volume that you want to. But yeah, anyways, that's kind of the stack. And so after you get past those three types of flipping volumes, and not that you can't flip properties in that range, it just gets increasingly more difficult. You start getting into some value add stuff, man. And so that's where number one, you get into minor lot splits, like I talked about, where you basically just cut it up on paper, or maybe you do some minor improvements, test wells, or you put a well on the property, driveway permits if you want to put driveways in. Maybe you cut some roads into it. Maybe you put a fence up, that kind of thing. And then there's major development entitlements, right? And the thing is, with minor lot splits, your conversion is typically going to be somewhere between 6 and 18 months, just depending on the asset, depending on, where you are in the market. And each one is going to sell off at a different pace, right? Whereas like your entitlements, like all my friends in entitlements, that takes 12 to 24 months typically, right? And so it's just like, man, I don't want to wait 2 years to go make $1 million. Like, let's just do more projects. Like, let's just figure out how to do more projects. And when I have systematized and delegated the teams that print cash, I'm going to go figure out how to do the higher value stuff and then go hire a project manager to run that stuff for me. But that's the game, right? Is you have to figure out how do I get more valuable over time? And then, your labor gets more expensive. Like I can hire a $5 an hour VA to go text landowners that own properties that are worth $30,000 all day long. And I don't want to do that and have them on the phones with property owners that own a $1.2 million property. It's a little bit different. Can you? Yes. Right. You got to do a lot more volume though. You're playing a quality versus quantity game. There's only so much inventory when you start playing in that more expensive sandbox is the fact of the matter.
Sure. Yeah. So you guys kind of, you stay in that kind of that space where, I mean, that's pretty interesting, actually. I mean, you said that between 30 to 70 grand purchase price, you're kind of doubling your money on the sale. I mean, at least I guess gross margin, but still, I mean, that's
of course
pretty damn good margins, like, frankly. So
yeah, it's great. Yeah, and like transparently, not every single one of our deals is that nice. I wish they were, man. Like we've had deals we buy for 30, sell for close to 60, buy for 50. We just listed for 120. It's in East Texas. We already have people walking the property, so according to my realtor, so that's it's getting good activity. I mentioned you at the beginning of the call. We got one in Florida. We bought for 150. We cut it into 2 lots. We have it listed at 300. So you get good deals like that. But man, we also have deals where we get like an $8,000. Man, I had one a couple of months ago. My team dropped the ball a little bit. It had an oil pipeline on the back, and they comped it as if that was good like surface property. And there's like a big pipe on 1.5 acres of it. And so when we had people walk the property, they're like, dude, what the heck? I can't even get to the back of the property. I can't use it. It's like a 4-acre parcel. So we ended up making like a $1,200 assignment on that. It was like barely enough money. Like I lost money on that when you factor in the photography, the listings, my team's time, my time to make that deal happen. So I prefer not to do deals like that. But I'd be lying to you if I was like, oh man, like, yeah, we're getting 4 contracts a month and every single one I make at least 30 grand. Like, it'd be bull crap, man. So that's there's a range. I think on average our gross profits average out just about like a hair over 20 grand. And so we do a couple flips a month.
Okay.
And we have a team of about we have overhead around 15 grand a month right now, sometimes upwards of 20. So, it's not like all that's going into my pocket. I've got a business partner, and you've obviously got to save up cash for risk. And so it's not like I'm just like pocketing tens of thousands of dollars. Well, depends on the month, but you know how the game is, man.
Yeah, maybe tens of thousands, but not hundreds of thousands yet.
Yeah. As I was saying it, right, not hundreds of thousands yet. And that's where you start getting into those higher value deals, right? As soon as you start hitting, hey, like we have our flips going, and that makes us like, this month in revenue, we're going to do just under $70,000, right? Which sounds great, except we have almost no sales over the next 30 days, right? We have inventory and we have nothing under contract besides like one $15,000 sale of some property we own, which is really, really small.
Yeah.
So it's like, that doesn't, so it's like real estate can be so feast and famine with your inventory. You've got to be smart with it. And so all that to say though, like you do those flips consistently and then you sprinkle in one of those big projects, right? Like for you, maybe you do some apartments or some bigger assets, or maybe you do a portfolio or something, or I'm not quite sure, what the best way for how to liquidate is in that class. But for us, it's like, okay, if we can do a minor lot split, if we can do one a quarter, right, that's going to add like another 7 figures to our top line of our gross profits there, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot needs to go right. Our cash conversion cycle is slower. Our risk is higher. Our cost of capital is higher. So there are variables in there. And every single time, like it's not like all that's going in my pocket. I wish it was, but it's just like, I'd be lying to you if I was like, hey, you like do a flip, there's $400,000 in margin. I take that $400,000, I buy a Lambo. I go to, Miami, I hit you up in Jacksonville. It doesn't play out that way. Not yet, at least, man. There's levels to the game and you got to build. So I'm still in a big building season.
Gotcha. And then you said like a percentage of your deals, about a third of them or 40% of them, you're kind of wholesaling to the retail market. So kind of like a novation would be done on the house flipper wholesaling side, right? I know what the pitch is on our side for a novation type deal, but what's the pitch to a seller for you guys on the land side? Like what's like, how does that work? Like.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for us, it's, we start off, right? You get a verbal. Now we're walking them through next steps, right? The sales process. And so we're going to tell them like, hey, just so you know, like we're going to sign the contract. Here are the terms. It typically takes us about 120 days to close. We're going to kind of slow down there, see if there's an objection, right? And it's like, oh, well, why so long, right? And then I'll ask, oh, wait, just out of curiosity, are you in a rush to sell the property? Well, no, I'm not in a rush. Okay, cool. Because, man, I'll tell you too, like here's a big differentiator between houses and land is to speak Tony Robbins for a second. In houses, people are running away from pain, whereas in land, people are running towards pleasure. It's desired end state. It's not running from pain. It's not. There's no motivation necessarily. They have motivators. Don't get me wrong. It's just a different world. Everybody owns their land free and clear. Nobody really cares. Their foot's not on fire. Do you get problem situations? Yeah, but they're rare, man. They're really, really rare. And so we get a lot of what I call complacent sellers, of just people who are like, yeah, I mean, I don't use it. Yeah, I'd sell the property, right? Which is why we can market to landowners. And in that, with our talk track, it's like, okay, if you're not in a rush to sell the property, here's what we do is 2 things. Number one, man, like I've got to get a survey on the property. Like if you can find a faster surveyor, I'm more than happy to work with them. But for us, typically everybody's at least 60 days out, right? And sometimes there's hangups, like the Department of Transportation won't get back to us. And so I just don't need you and tell you it's going to be closed in 30, 60 days. So we just got to get a surveyor out there. If it's somewhere that needs to get a perk test, right, we got to get a perk test out there. Somebody's got to test. For those that don't know, perk is short for percolation, which essentially means I test the soil to make sure I can install a septic system, right? So if you're not on city sewer, you can get a septic system in the property. And so anyways, that's some stuff we'll tell them to delay off the time. But of course, we tell them we're going to market their property, right? And it's not explicit like, hey man, I'm going to list this on the MLS. It's not what I say. It's not just like, hey, I'm just going to list your property on Zillow and we're going to see what comes. It's more so like, our talk track is a lot of like, hey, like Mike, just we're going to do like 1 of 5 things with the property typically. A lot of times we will just buy it outright. We are the buyer a lot of times. Sometimes with properties though, we work with partners. We work with JV people. We have other people fund our deals. We have we have capital partners. We have local experts we work with. Some developers in the area we'll partner with, and they'll compensate us. And then sometimes we will leverage local agents actually, and we'll leverage marketing platforms like the multiple listing service. But I'll tell you, Mike, this doesn't change anything for you. I just need you to sign this attorney in fact document because it's something our lawyers say that we need. This doesn't change anything for you. At the end of the 90 days, title company's going to ask you a wire or check. And you're going to get whichever one you prefer. Right? You're still going to get your 90 grand or whatever. Right. So like, it's really important to give them at the end of that, like close that loop. You don't want to leave ambiguity of like, wait, so you're doing what to my property? And again, to come back to Tony Robbins, there's 6 human desires. As soon as you hurt certainty, right? You play into uncertainty. Well, uncertainty leads to fear. and fear leads to inaction. So they're not signing your
Hmm.
contract, right? So it's really, really important you close that loop at the end of that in terms of your sales process.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. And then I assume you guys are doing everything over the phone since you're in 6 states at the same time.
Yes, we are 100% remote. I only have one staff that's US based besides me and my business partner. Everybody else is overseas. So we've got two in the Philippines, one in Nicaragua. And so, yeah, we're 100% remote. It'd be tough for them to go visit our properties. But
Yeah.
we will get boots on the ground. Like a lot of times we'll hire a photographer to walk the property and take pictures of it when they're doing the aerials. You can just go on droners.io and list the same way you would an ad on like Craigslist, and people will go apply for jobs and they'll, you hire somebody and they'll go they'll go do pictures of the property. When we're hiring realtors, we'll ask them to go walk the property before we buy it. Say, hey, Mike, we've got a property under contract. We're looking for somebody to list it for us. We're looking for a partner in the area. If and then we'll go through a qualification process. If you know land, great. I'm happy to sign like exclusivity with you so that as soon as we take title to it, we'll list it with you. But hey, would you be willing to walk the property, make sure there are no red flags before we buy it? I just don't want either of us to get stuck with something. You know what I mean? And so that way you can get them to go walk it
Hmm.
on the front end. You can give them $100 gift card or something. Even ask them, hey, I'm happy to pay you for your time. And typically they'll like take that as, oh, he's serious, but like, no, you don't need to. I'm more than happy to just do so if they're local, they're going to go do the thing, right? If they're like an above and beyond kind of dispo person there.
Yeah. Gotcha. Cool. And then you said the way that you really just because you're relying on these agents to sell it is you just really track those two metrics, right? Do you do anything else to ensure that your dispositions are going well besides just ask how many leads and how many people have walked the property?
Oh man, I wish I had a good answer for you, Mike. And this probably is a testament to the fact of our immaturity in the dispositions. Those are our main two metrics, man. That's like what we're tracking on Dispo, and we move everything, so it's not been like a major issue. We will also look at like saves on Zillow, which is like not my favorite metric, so I don't talk about it because it doesn't
Sure.
mean as much. There's how many views am I getting? How many likes am I
More
getting?
vanity.
I feel like it's the equivalent of like when you were like in high school and you looked at Instagram likes. That's like what it feels like. It's like, oh, people like my property. So we don't like. I wouldn't say I use it as like a benchmark for the business necessarily. It's more so like phone calls, people walking it. Okay, contract sales.
Gotcha. So if you're 30 days in and you're not really getting any contracts, you're dropping the price or you're adjusting something with your marketing typically in order to make that deal move.
Yeah, for us, yeah, it's yeah. For us, it's if we're 30 days in and we're not getting leads, we're gonna drop the price. But I typically won't drop the
Mm.
price if I'm getting leads people walking the property. Because man, here's the thing about land is if somebody saw the price, walked the property, liked the property, they are a buyer, right? We qualified them in terms of cash. We qualified them in terms of
Hmm.
timeline to purchase a property. They walked the property. They can afford the property. They want the property. Sell them the property, And so that's pretty much all the qualifiers. Like land is so much less nitpicky compared to houses. Like houses, man, you get people nitpicking everything, right? Like the feng shui is off, the layout's weird. I hate that paint color. The neighbor's trash can smelled. Like what you get random stuff. The Whereas with land, it's like I can shoot my pigs on it. No, I don't know what people are doing, but it's that kind of stuff, and so they're less picky, which can result in both like a better disposition process in terms of you need like a less tight qualification for your sellers. You just have buyers, but you have so much of a smaller pool of buyers that you have to work them a lot
Mm.
more. Does that make sense?
Right. It's probably a lot less urgency too to buy a piece of land versus, if you're selling your older house and you need to buy a new house, like you need a house.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, I think the only urgency we've gotten is a guy that like bought a tractor and wanted to make sure he got crops in this time of year. But that's pretty rare.
that's hilarious. Well, let's say that someone,
Yeah.
watches this show and they're like, "Wow, I really like this idea of flipping land." What would you recommend someone do, kind of as like one of their first, let's call it 3 steps in order to get started in doing what you do?
Yeah. Man, the first thing I would do, so like I'm going to just say education because like you need to learn the fundamentals at some level. There's a ton of stuff out there on YouTube. I'm a part owner and affiliated with LearnLand. Not trying to plug myself super hard, but check out our free stuff on YouTube. LearnLand. Clint Turner is the founder of that. He's got a ton of free stuff on his YouTube channel. We dropped a whole course worth of stuff on there. Ari Tipster posts a ton of free stuff. There's podcasts out there at the wazoo I could listen to. So educate yourself in some sense. Go get a free course. Go watch YouTube. Go listen to podcasts. LearnLand has a free course that's available. Do something, right? Just like learn enough and then take action. Okay. And by taking action, pick a county. Don't overcomplicate it. Pick a county. Send out mail to property owners, right? And you can do that based on parameters you find in those free YouTube videos and free podcasts. All right. Get the phone calls. So the only things you need to set up are a mailbox, a phone system, and a website. So you can do lead capture. Have people come inbound from that outbound marketing, whether it's cold calls. I recommend direct mail to beginners because, man, I know people that are getting deals for every 1,000 to 3,000 letters. Typically, it's still pretty unsaturated, honestly. Yeah, I know. I'm about to turn a bunch of these house guys onto land. I feel like I'm over here, like, yeah, your cost per acquisition is pretty low. Right. It's a terrible niche. Don't touch it. There's no money in it. But all that to say, I would educate yourself, get out marketing, set up those things, field the phone calls, make an offer to every single property, and then follow up until you die or they die. And if they die, follow up with their heirs, right? Until one of you dies first. And if you do those things, you will get a deal. Just educate yourself, do enough marketing, field the phone calls, follow up, make your offers, boom. So that's the 3 steps are educate, take action, make offers. If I had to boil it down to 3 things.
So is your guys' theory because there is like kind of less motivation, it's more like kind of driving towards gain as opposed to household selling business is a lot of running away from pain. You just kind of make
Yeah.
offers to anyone who calls versus
Everyone who
putting them through.
calls. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough when you get very unmotivated people, man. I feel bad for my team sometimes, but they are rock stars. And obviously everybody who started in this business just knows, like, man, it's a lot of rejection, right? It's a lot of rejection early on when you're doing those calls yourself, but you just got to build thick skin to it. And I'm like, listen, man, like what I'm doing is I'm making offers on properties. People can take them, people cannot take them, whichever you want to do, right? I'm not forcing you into anything. I'm not twisting your arm. If me selling to you is a value add to your life, here's my money. You know what I mean? I'll get you a $25,000 check tomorrow, right? And so, I bring that up to say, like, yeah, it's more desired end state. And so even in our scripts, man, we're looking for like, hey, like, well, just out of curiosity, like, what would you do with $25,000? Well, I haven't taken my wife on a vacation in 6 years, and I would take her on that vacation to New Zealand we've always wanted to go to, or Paris or whatever. All right, man, well, what do you say? Like, sign this tonight and we'll get you your check in 3 weeks. And, and in 4 weeks, you and the wife should be headed out to Paris. How's that sound? Right. So you're selling based on desired end state, right? Versus like, well, hey man, look, I just want to make sure you don't lose your house. Right? Like, very different conversation you're having there. And so,
roof is falling in, like, plumbing's off, like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel so bad, man, because in that dire state, like like when people are in pain, it's like, oh my God, you deal with like medical issues. And it's just like, you like hear the worst stories, right? Like, and that stuff's draining. Whereas like, I'm like, man, I'm funding vacations. People are buying new cars. Like, I love what we're doing. This is fun.
I mean, I always say that, like, when kind of after moving to the investing side of real estate from, like, I was an agent years and years ago. When you're an agent, people aren't really that happy at a closing. There's always like something they want to pick at that went wrong, right? Maybe it took a little longer than they expected or whatever, the inspection, this and that. I'll tell you though, when we buy someone's house, I mean, they're so happy at the closing because it really does solve like a really major problem for them. So that's kind of
It's true.
nice to see coming from the agent side, right? Where everyone at the closing's like, like, it was pretty good, but like could have been better. Like, it's like, oh, thanks.
Yeah. 100%, man. Yeah, we honestly typically don't get any feedback at closing. Like, we'll follow up and stuff and just be like, hey, how was the experience? But it was good, thanks. And it's again, it's so different. But it's a really interesting business for sure.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, we're getting to the end here. There's always 2 questions I like to ask at the end of the show. And the first is, what is the craziest or most uncomfortable situation you've ever experienced in a real estate deal?
Oh man. This is such a good question. So it's funny, man. It's actually my first ever deal, which, makes sense. You're going to be more uncomfortable in those typical first couple, first handful, first dozen deals. You're also just going to do things you probably shouldn't do. And so, man, I for those who don't know, I currently live in Chicago. I'm actually moving down to Dallas, Texas later this year. I'll be in the Frisco area. For anybody out here that's in the area, feel free to hit me up. But my first marketing campaign went out to rural Wisconsin. It's on the south end, but it was pretty rural. And I got a gentleman who called, and he was a hermit. This guy, he didn't trust banks. He didn't trust notaries. He didn't trust agents. He didn't trust anyone. And so, I made an offer. When he accepted the offer on the property, it was $2,000 plus, 1,100 in back taxes plus 400 or 500 in cleanup fees, which is where I said, it's $3,000, 3,500 all in. And you always remember that first deal so well, but so when I was talking to him, he agrees on a price. I'm like, hey, I need you to sign this purchase agreement so I can get this into title. And I sent him the purchase agreement. He calls me back. He said, Ajay, there's no check in the purchase agreement. I was like, Mike, I can't just go mailing out money, dude. Like, you could never talk to me again. What do you mean? And he was like, well, I'm just not signing until I get a check. And I'm like, what? And so I'm like, okay, I need a notary. And so now I'm pivoting. I'm like, okay, let's not do title. I'm going to do a title search through a third-party service like Title Pro USA or something, and then I'll just make sure title's clean. And then I'm going to go self-close because that's something you can do, right? I can whip up a deed, right? I can go use Rocket Lawyer, whip up a deed, get him to sign it, get a notary. I'm like, hey, who do you bank with? This bank. Great. Let's meet at your bank. You've got a notary there. I'm going to bring a cashier's check. I will walk you to the teller. We'll make sure it clears together. We'll sign and notarize these documents. We'll be good to go, right? And if that doesn't work, I'll order a mobile notary to the parking lot, whatever needs to happen. He says, my car doesn't run so good. I'm like, man, are you kidding me? And so then I'm honestly, man, I about just threw in the towel on this. Who knows where I'd be today if I did. And I told my then girlfriend, now fiance, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. And she was like, Ajay, it's your first deal. Just keep pushing. I'm like, really? And so I was like, all right. And so I give him a call back. I said, Mike, I will meet you on your trailer. He lives like on a trailer. Man, it's not a trailer that's like a real house, man. It's like a trailer on a stone slab. I said, I'll meet you out there. I will bring $2,000 in cash and we will order a mobile notary to meet us there. How's that sound? And he said, sounds pretty good. And so that's what I did. And I drove out there. His front lawn was so overgrown. I'm not joking. The like weeds up there is probably 4 feet. Like I was up to my chest in grass. I was getting bugs all over me. I'm a little brown boy in rural Wisconsin, man. I had probably ticks crawling up my freaking sweater vest out the wazoo or whatever I wore that day. It was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing out here? And man, but we got the deal done. We got it done. We got it notarized. I gave him his money. I rolled up with $2,000 in cash, and that was the beginning of my career. And so it was extremely uncomfortable because I was like, man, I just hope this guy doesn't like pull a gun out on me or something. You just don't know. But I was young and stupid, and I'm still young and I'm still stupid, but I'm not as young or stupid, so I probably wouldn't do it the same way again. Yeah, that's and all that though, I feel worse for the mobile notary. He was probably like, what the hell is going on out here?
For like 120 bucks.
So, yeah, right. He like drove in from Madison, Wisconsin for this and was just like, where are we? And there's no phone service out here. Like,
guy with a lot of cash.
So, yeah, man, definitely. Oh my gosh, definitely the most uncomfortable deal I've done.
That's hilarious, man. That's great.
Yeah.
So second question is, if you could go back in time, give yourself one piece of advice when you were looking for that first deal, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
Oh man, one piece of advice. I would say just stay focused, man. I got distracted by so much stuff. Even after my first like handful of deals, like I bought, I paid way too much money for some random high ticket like marketing agency course. I paid money for some stupid like e-commerce business, one of those done for you services you get Instagram ads for. I tried doing different types of deals. I tried playing around in other real estate sandboxes as soon as I made my first like 30, 40 grand in land. And I would just say, just stay focused. If you just pick a niche, market, send out marketing, make offers, follow up, you'll get deals. It's as simple as that. And I'll just pair that with, I scaled slowly initially. If I could go back, I probably would have hired a bunch of like really cheap VAs sooner. Like get those $3, $5, $7 hour VAs out of the Philippines and Latin America sooner, because you can just scale through labor so quickly on all the like mundane tasks, but you just bottleneck yourself because you think nobody else can do it as well as you. And here's what I would say is like, guys, like these are people, these are humans. Humans are not, they're smart, capable people. Just like make the mistakes. Like the best way to become good at hiring is to hire. The best way to become better at sales is to sell, right? And so you just have to like based on culture. Okay, it's all principles, and the sooner you figure that out, the better off you're going to be. The faster you're going to be able to scale. So I know that was like 17 different things there, but man, if I could just shake my younger self's head, I'd be like $3 million richer than I am right now. And so that's what I would
Yeah.
say.
Cool. Well, awesome, man. Well, if people want to reach out to you after the show, if they have questions or maybe they're interested in the course that you're a part of, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, I would just DM me. Give me a DM. My handle's at investing with Ajay. So, yeah, right there. Investing with Ajay. I'm on Instagram like every day, unfortunately, whether that's good or bad. And so I definitely am pretty active there. So just hit me up. I'm pretty active in the DMs. I'll get back to you within the day, and we'll have a good little chat. Yep, you can shoot me an email
Cool.
too at Ajay at
Sweet, man.
learn.land.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being on the show. This is great.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me, Mike. This was super fun, man.